morning. I'd like to start with a huge thank you to the Schram Foundation and to the Schram Teacher Academy for Research and Technology for inviting me here to join you. And in particular, a thank you to Jason for reaching out to us at Kodaikanal International School to join this esteemed event. So I'd like to start by introducing myself a little bit. My name is Cindy Beals, as stated before, and I am the academic vice principal at Kodaikanal. And the main thing this slide is here to show you is that I've had a variety of different experiences, both as a teacher and a leader, doing a number of different things that is informing most of what I'm sharing with you today. And this is helping you to see that I've traveled the world and enjoying international education for over 3 decades, starting my career in the United States and then moving abroad and teaching at a number of different schools, and now hope to find the end of my career staying here in India because it's such an amazing, special place. So, life abroad, many of our students choose to go internationally. Many of our teachers at international schools come from abroad, and so I thought I would spend a little bit of time sharing what it's like to be an international nomad, working in schools around the world. And the first comes at looking about cultural immersion. By being someone that spends time in different countries, you get to learn different perspectives. You get to learn more about different cultures, which opens your eyes to new ways of approaching things, new ways of thinking about things. You start to understand more about the diversity of the world and how so many people in so many places approach life in different ways. And that breadth of understanding helps you understand a little bit more about how the world works and how to understand people differently. Sometimes, though, this also leads to cultural clashes. And working through those cultural clashes when two different cultures meet and have differences in how they approach things can provide some challenges. And working through those challenges gives you a great, important skill. But it does have its downsides in that it takes time to work through those challenges and understand that it is representative of the differences in our cultures. Another thing that comes with the cultural immersion is understanding that when you go back home, you have what's called reverse culture shock. I didn't fully understand how different it would be when I went back to the United States, and it no longer felt like home, because I was changed, and yet I was expecting a change where I went back, and it wasn't there. And my new perspective and that mismatch between what my expectations of what home was like and what my new eyes from the unique perspective of being an international nomad has meant for how I interacted with what home was, which in a way has now raised questions. What does home mean for a person like me? Support is another area that I'd like to talk about. In the different schools that I've been in, support has been varied. In some schools, there was a huge amount of support when it came to getting my visa, getting housing, how I was welcomed. In some schools, please go get a visa. This is your budget for a house, go find one. And others, this is the house we think will fit you best. If it doesn't, we'll help you find another one. You'll find the fridge already stocked with food, so you don't have to worry about going shopping. And, we've got this person here to help you go shopping so you can understand what the grocery stores are like in this new country with a language you don't speak. And those differences in support make a huge difference in how the students that are new to the country, how the faculty that are new that are coming in, how they're able to engage and have those parts of Bloom's taxonomy and those basic needs met so that they feel psychologically safe to engage in being fully there and fully present. For faculty children and for students that travel around, there's a term called third culture kids, TCK. And third culture kids have their entire lives often moving around to different cultures, to different countries. And there's a reason there's this term, third culture kid, for them, because they never know where home is. They learn not to get too attached to their friends because in 2, 3, 4 years, they might be moving to a new country and we'll never see them again. Or they'll try desperately to get back to them, but they'll find that their friends are scattered around the world. It provides some levels of insecurity where they're living more in the moment because they don't know what's coming forward in the future. And it gives them such a broad perspective of what life is like outside of their home country, if they even know their home country. In some cases, the children are born outside of where their parents were born and only go to, quote, home when going to visit grandparents. And that provides such a different kind of understanding of who they are and makes the question, where are you from, such a difficult one to answer. And the implications for all of this life on the move or life in different places has an impact on how deeply you have friendships. I will see some friends only every 5 years. When we see each other, we engage fully together because we've created the kind of bond that was so intense when we were together that when we are able to be together again, it's there and we resume as if it's not been even a day, even though it's been 5 years. And that's a special kind of relationship. But it's also hard because right now, I think the largest concentration of friends that I have in the world is 3 people in the same city. Everyone else is all around the world, and it makes it hard to reconnect as often. Other implications come with the distance when emergencies happen. If a family member or a friend gets sick, you can't easily just pick up and get there. Most recently, a close friend of mine, his father had an accident, and there was some time, but not a lot of time. And he was 1 hour short of making it before his father passed. And this haunts him because he made the choice to be away. And not being able to be there is something that always crosses my mind, particularly as my parents age. You also never know the situations that will arise in your new home country or your adopted home. One of the places that I chose to live most recently was Ukraine. And as you may be aware, there's been some tough situations going on in Ukraine. And that's not something as an American I was well prepared for. What am I going to do if I all of a sudden find myself in a war zone? These kinds of things affect all of us. And it moves us to enrich the whole self of who we are. Our souls grow and develop, and we become more adaptable to the hardships in life. We know more how to roll with the punches because we spend our whole lives adapting and changing. And in some kind of ways, this is some of the skills that we'll need for the future. Many of us had hardships with the uncertainties of COVID, and those uncertainties of COVID are similar to the uncertainties that many international nomads live their life with. And we found that many of our international students in the COVID times were more resilient to what came to them than the students from the home country during that time, because they hadn't had to undergo some of those challenges in their lives and dealing with the ambiguity of what's going to happen next in the same way that our third culture kids were prepared and our international teachers were prepared for dealing with that level of uncertainty. This quote from Brendan Burchard challenges the pathway to engagement and progress in our lives, but not all challenges are created equal. Some challenges make us feel alive, engaged, connected, and fulfilled. Others simply overwhelm us. For me, this speaks to that preparing ourselves, and more importantly, preparing our children, be them our own children or the children we work with every day, to help them build that resilience so that they're able to embrace that challenge and not just survive, but thrive rather than being overwhelmed by what comes to them. And this gets me to looking at international schools and global education in general and how we approach working with our students. Across international schools, we find that there's a big difference in the types of international schools there are. In some cases, it's because of their curriculum. They're teaching a curriculum that is designed not based off of the needs of the home country, but really to be meeting the global citizen. And there are a variety of different programs, and I'll get a little bit more into that soon, about the different kinds of programs and the curriculums that are involved in helping to create the supports and structures and build the student holistically so that they can deal with these challenges of being a global citizen. Some international schools are international in that they say, we will only accept 30% of students from any one international or any one nationality. Others are international where they range between 1 to 100% from one particular nationality. So there's great differences. You know, one of the international schools that I was at, out of 1,000 kids, there were 3 that were not from the home country. Others that I've been at, there were only a handful that were from the country of host country, and all of them had multiple passports because they had a rule that they did not accept students from the home country. And so they could only come in if they were ethnically from that location, but had another passport. Teachers, similarly, we see a range of what level of number of teachers and their demographics. You will get some schools where almost entirely the faculty comes from the home country or the host country, and you'll get some where there's a wide range of where the teachers come from. And in some cases, you'll find that only the teachers of the home language are the teachers from the host country. And so you'll get a wide range of what supports and interactions and development that the students have in their interactions with these teachers. Yet in most cases, the staff outside of the educational staff are almost entirely from the home country. So one thing that we need to pay attention to and be aware when we're working in schools like this is to ensure that there's not this feeling that the teachers from abroad, the students from abroad, are different from the staff from the home culture. There tends to be this us and them kind of feeling that almost gets classist as a result of the fact that in some cases, the only time they see someone from the home country, they're in a position that is mostly of service. And it's important not to allow others, particularly because in many of these international schools, you'll have students coming from wealthy families. And we don't want to perpetuate this idea that the students can look at people from the host country as being someone who is there to serve them. Because in the end, all of us are there to serve each other. All of us are there as equals to support the students in their growth, because that's the mission that we have as a school. And when we look at our global approach, what we find among the international schools and global education is that it's about creating an understanding of what it means to be an interconnected world. What does it mean to ensure that we understand that while we have different perspectives, we can work together to make the world a different place, a better place. As part of this, all international schools have an emphasis on understanding each other. And some of this comes through language learning. Only through really starting to understand languages do you understand the culture more deeply. And spending time not just understanding the perspectives of others, but understanding themselves as learners. What is their identity? This will help them in the future as they work to develop that resilience, that understanding of themselves gives them a security that the international nomadness takes away from them. And so this, along with experiential learning, where it's not just being in a classroom, but we also have experiences beyond the classroom that brings learning a little bit more to life than just hearing about it, because we're now experiencing it. And that could be through extensive field trips that maybe even take us abroad. At some schools that I was at, in order to have your football match, you got on a plane and went to a different country. And that changes the perspective when you have that kind of experiential learning. And sometimes it's just getting on Zoom and connecting with students around the world in the way in the old days we used to do through pen pal relationships and sending letters back and forth that help us understand the students from around the world and how they work. With the digital age now allowing this to be a little bit more easy so that we can have regular connections over Zoom with students from around the world and help them to get that perspective beyond the perspective of the students that they're regularly with. So as we look at all of the different international curriculums that I'm familiar with, at least, that are English medium, the similarities that I find come in their flexibility, their ability to help students understand how to get different perspectives, the flexibility that they give in learning how to design, empowering them to use design thinking, for example, to build their empathy skills, to help them use design to understand that they can intentionally create versus just going about and creating something. We ask them to learn about others' perspectives and challenge them to think beyond their own perspective by introducing them to a variety of different perspectives. It tends to be learner-centric, where we put the student at the center of the learning experience. Instead of having a sage on the stage, we have a guide on the side, as they might say, where we put the learners as drivers of their own education. We can guide them to understand what the learning outcomes are and help them see the path. But rather than dragging them along the path or just, we show them the path, and if they start to stray, we can nudge them along. That level of empowerment, where we're giving them the initiative, is helping to build those same skills that allow them to feel confident, to have that strength in who they are, to be able to handle the uncertainties. Be those uncertainties because we might be living in different places, or uncertainties because the future is changing and we don't know what's coming up next. There is also an emphasis on thinking, ensuring that our students, rather than memorizing knowledge that they could look up in their pocket, particularly now with artificial intelligence making the thinking so much more available to us, but an emphasis on critical thinking, creative thinking, systems thinking, putting things together and making that thinking visible. Because Finding ways to think is one thing, but helping others to understand your thinking so that you can collaborate, you work together, and be effective moving forward are important skills. Global education is often holistic in nature, working to develop the whole child with programs that go beyond what might be considered the core academics, to include an emphasis on understanding yourself, building self-management skills, helping to look at your social-emotional well-being, looking to understand your identity, looking to develop your all levels of health, be it social, emotional, physical, cognitive, spiritual, developing various aspects of who you are. And lastly, it's about providing pathways. And those pathways can look different based off of the school, but the pathways are there to allow us to guide the students in the way that connects to the school and its values. The various schools that I've been at across the years, which has been rough 10 different schools now, all of them have different missions and visions. But one thing that'll be true about all of the schools that I've chosen to work at is that they live their mission and vision. And that is the guidepost that anchors the school to who are they as a school and what makes the most difference in the students' lives. And we use those values as a school to make important decisions. Every decision that we made when we were in Ukraine, dealing either with the pandemic or with the forthcoming full-scale invasion, were based in the value that were there for us, where one of those values is what's best for the kids. Having those guideposts eased us in that process because we knew what was right. Now, at Kodaikanal International School, the values are slightly different, but they're rooting us as an institution and rooting me as a new employee in knowing which way am I there guiding the students and helping them to get to the future that we believe in. Because that, in the end, is a lot of what makes us special. And there are lots of different pathways that can get us there. But by understanding our institution and what we believe in strongly helps us to ensure that we are doing what we know to be best, even if it differs from the school down the street. And this is allowing parents and students choices to find the school that best match who they are and what they see as being their future. Some of the curriculums that I'm more familiar with come through the International Baccalaureate. 3 of the schools that I've been at are IB schools, and they've ranged in how connected they were to the IB, to one school where, okay, this is IB week, we're going to now teach in the IB style, and then we're going to go back to what the host country approach towards education is, to ones where, well, Kodai was the 3rd school in Asia, the 1st school in India to introduce the IB, and it is in the school's DNA. And that approach is integral to what we do in every aspect of things. It's inquiry-based, with this idea being that if we keep the kids wondering, if we build their curiosity, allow that curiosity to maintain, and put them at the center so that they're focusing on their curiosity, that will enable them to build those skills of becoming lifelong learners. It's a curriculum with a breadth of different subjects that they're doing, including transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary learning, recognizing the idea that when I was a math teacher and when I was a physics teacher at the same school, and some kids I had taught in both subjects, and I would be introducing something in physics class that was related to something in math class, and they'd be, what are you talking about? And I would say, all right, I'm going to take my physics teacher hat off, I'm going to put my math teacher on, this is what I'm going to say. Oh, this idea of the connections that sometimes the students have a hard time seeing because they put on their blinders and they say, okay, now I'm in this class and this is what I'm learning. And IB believes in this idea of finding those connections through either interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary learning opportunities. And the emphasis is holistic, with this idea of building students with an international mindset. And when they do their assessments, it is criteria-based. So the students are focusing less on a number or a score and more on the descriptor of what is the learning that should be happening. In the British or Cambridge curriculum, it's a more balanced approach where you're finding a little bit of inquiry-based, but a little bit that's sage on the stage. And so it's a combination where there's some that's more directed learning and there's some that is more inquiry learning. And that learning tends to be a little bit more in-depth. Whereas the IB, because you're taking so many subjects, you're learning it at a broadly, but not as with as much depth. The Cambridge curriculum tends to be fewer subjects, but with greater depth. And it tends to focus on the academic rigor to ensure that we are creating strong thinkers, and they're basing their assessments on rigorous standards to ensure that the excellence level is there. The American curriculum, and I will sometimes put American in quotes, because honestly, in the American curriculum, it frequently differs from state to state how they approach things. What tends to be similar across all of the states, though, is this idea that we want to be holistic. We want to make sure that we're spending time looking at the whole child and developing them social-emotionally, physically, etc., not just in the core academic subjects. It tends to also be flexible in how it brings things about, partially because in every state it is different. There's ability from within school to school to make some choices of what makes sense for them. But there is an emphasis on individualism and creativity, about ensuring that we're understanding the individual learner and building them up and helping them develop their creativity. And this is a standard space where we're constantly, in the US, doing assessments. They could be small little assessments every day. They could be, slightly larger every week. But we're constantly giving feedback to the students so they understand where they are, they can celebrate their strengths, and they can focus on what areas they need to grow. And then other. There are a lot of schools in international curriculum that I'm familiar with that don't fit into one of these three. And again, I'm just looking English medium, so I'm not referring to like the French curriculum or the some of the other countries where the language is different. They tend to be more innovative. They tend to be smaller schools or smaller consortiums of schools. They're almost always learner-centric and with a focus in one way or another on empowering students. And how they empower students might look different from school to school. And they tend to have an assessment where they're based off of mastery. These are the learning outcomes. Have you mastered them or have you not mastered them? Rather than giving them a grade and a percentage, like many United States schools do, rather than giving them a score to 1 to 7 like the IB does, things along those lines, it's more like an on-off switch. Have you mastered this skill? Yes or no? And this is opening up things in a different kind of way by doing a mastery-based learning approach, because it changes whether or not we are, how long it takes a child to learn things. Most teachers know that different students learn at a different rate. And this way, we're not just picking the child in the middle and saying, okay, some of you, you're going to get it and you're going to be, you just hold on a little bit while the rest of them catch up. And some of them are really struggling, and when you move on, they're not ready to move on. And the mastery-based approach gives a way of looking at that. But no matter which way we're coming out of our high school experience, we're finding that the students, many of them want to go to university abroad. Some of them here in India will stay in India. And More and more, we're seeing a larger proportion of students either taking a gap year to figure out a little bit more of who they are and what they want to be, or going directly into the workforce. Because as society is making a change, the universities are not changing at the same rate. And we're finding more and more employers willing to hire students without that college degree or that university degree because they have the right skill set, they have the right mindset. And so it's going to differ across the world which pathway through high school will be most recognizable. And so in what programs they're interested in to get into North American universities differs a little bit from the British or European, Australian, the Indian colleges, or other approaches. But in the end, it's about what form of development makes the most sense for that child and connecting them to the right way for their future as they see it, at least from my perspective. And when we look at these different kinds of programs, the IB, the British, etc., they have different ways of approaching how we're working with our youngest students. When are we giving exams? And here in India, the board exams at the end of grade 10 is so important for so much of what happens in the Indian culture. I wanted to make a point of looking specifically at those, and also at the end of the high school experience, when they're 18, what way are we assessing how they're doing things? And we'll see that those programs do differ a little bit, but in the end, these programs are all there and prepare our students well, just with slightly different emphasis, because they all have the same intention. So I'm going to just quickly go through. There are slides here, and hopefully we can make the slides available to everybody that allow you to look a little bit more in depth. But the Cambridge curriculum, there, and it differs across the years from pre-kindergarten through the end of the curriculum. The American curriculum is based off of standards that are there, different for in the end. But abroad, what they look for is AP exam scores. These are one-year courses where they take an exam that is considered higher level at the college level that allow credit to be given and understand where they've worked in depth on a topic. The IB program develops across the years. And then in the last 2 years, they have two programs. One, which they take 6 courses over 2 years, which is part of the diploma program, or in the careers-related program, they do one area of extreme focus where they're spending roughly 40% of their time in a particular area of focus, and then they strengthen in 3 other areas to get a more rounded. And so the diploma program first came around in 1968 as a pilot, and then fully in 1975. And then the careers-related program in 2012, where in 2016 it became available to the world. So it's just growing in what's being known. But at this point, in India alone, I believe there are 25 schools currently authorized to teach the CP, and that number is growing because, as an example, Kodaikanal International School is having its authorization for CP next month, and we're hoping to be yet another school added to that list of schools offering this different pathway to students where it's just as rigorous as the DP, but it allows them to focus on an area of passion. Last year, I was involved with a group of international teachers from around the world in a design sprint developing a new pathway diploma. And through that design sprint, all of the teachers and administrators that were there coming together and some of the schools are there, but they ranged from being in Peru, in Budapest, to China, to I was there here in India, and we worked together to come up what might be another program that would provide the kind of experience that we see fits where society is now, where we believe society is going, to help prepare our kids, with the focus being on learner agency and empowerment, well-being and inclusion, and having learning be meaningful. So I expect that probably a few years from now, because it takes time to develop a program that starts becoming accepted around the world, you might hear a little bit more about this Pathways diploma that's a little different from others. Some of the other schools and approaches that I've seen, I worked for a while at Phillips Exeter Academy, and their approach, the Harkness method, put 12 students around a table with a teacher, but that teacher was just one person around the table. And using the Socratic method, they approached how to build learning. My time at High Tech High and their approach with project-based learning was built to design to ensure that we were emphasizing equity among different kinds of students. Personalization, are we meeting the needs of the individual? The work being authentic, and collaboration. And this is yet another way that some schools have provided. When it comes to primary education, often they look very similar, but there are some that stand out with a different kind of program, such as the Waldorf Steiner schools, the Montessori schools, Amelia Reggio-inspired schools, and the International Primary Curriculum, among others, that start building some of these skills at the early age to ensure that our students are able to have what they need. I also had the privilege to be able to be a research-based expert at one of the schools that I was at, and during that time, as well as during my master's, I traveled to schools around the world to find some of the most innovative schools. And these are some of the schools that stand out to me as being exceptional examples of different ways that worked for those schools to build students, such as the Think Global School, where every semester of the last 3 years of high school are in a different country. And they're learning the different topics based off of what that country can help provide them. The High School of Recording Arts is a school that helps students from inner city Minneapolis, where they're being drawn away from joining gangs to focus on developing schools as recording arts so that they can go straight in. The Khan Lab School, you're all familiar probably with Khan Academy. Well, Khan Lab is where Saul Khan has brought together a group of kids for in-person learning, using the philosophy that we can learn through at our own pace. And he does something based off of the independence level. They're not based off of grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, etc. What level of independence are they at? How much guidance do they need from a teacher? And that's how they're grouped. And they move on based off of the pace of when they finish. And maybe they finish what I went through in 13 years. Maybe they finish that in 10. Maybe it takes them 15. Different kinds of ways happen through different schools that we are in. And I talked about how some of these innovative schools approach things through mastery. Did I get it? Did I not get it? Out of the United States, there's a group called the Mastery Transcript Consortium that's looking at providing new ways to present the learning to future institutions. And instead of focusing it on a GPA, there's a focus on what have they learned, what are their strengths, so we can celebrate the whole child. Because in the end, the careers of the future are very different from what we have now. The Institute for the Future has made the statement that 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 have not yet been invented. The World Economic Forum has looked in depth in this and has looked at what does the future of work look like. And this is taken straight from their website. You can go find that. And the nature of jobs is changing. You'll see on the slide, we have a number of jobs that existed in 2010 that don't exist now. We have now many jobs that exist now that didn't exist 10 years ago. And what might be the jobs of the future? So the Cognizant Center for the Future of Work has come up with this list of some examples of forecasted jobs for the future. But we don't know. We know that AI is changing things, but we don't know how it's going to change things yet. We can forecast and predict, But before you know it, we might even have quantum computing be realized. And when that happens, that'll be yet an even greater change that will provide that difference and the ambiguity that our students are going to need to endure, which is why that emphasis on knowing themselves and helping them understand the importance of adaptability and helping them understand that there are different ways they can approach things. The World Economic Forum, based off of this idea of the changing needs of jobs, has listed here a number of the different ways education should be changing to fit the needs that are changing in society and therefore what our students need. That tech revolution that's here and starting now, and maybe actually started about 10 years ago with first introductions to some basic AI, is just changing things. And the main thing is when we compare to other changes is the speed at which the change is happening, which provides more uncertainty and fear among many people, which is why helping with that social emotional learning, the resilience among kids, will help them understand and adapt to that future. Many people think the path to success, you start here, you go there. I was once in a session where there was, 500 people in the room, and the presenter asked, okay, how many of you are doing what you thought you would do when you graduated high school? And in that room of 500, there were 5. And he was pretty shocked that there were even 5. Because if you think back on your own life, it hasn't been a straight arrow and you're doing what you thought you would do when you were 10, right? It has this path that's just completely uncertain. And helping students understand that helps them move forward. Denise Pope, who's from Stanford University's Challenge Success Program, looks at the growing level of stress and anxiety among students. And in her book, Doing School, we're recognizing the fact that students have such pressure to get to the next stage of their life that they're just doing school like a task. They're not embracing the learning. They're instead going from task to task to task and getting it done. Be that the essay they need to do, whatever the exam is, maybe I have to memorize this, but they're just doing school. We need to help them understand that doing school just to get the grade that gets them into college does not necessarily prepare them for the future that they need. And with that, I'll ask, are there any questions? Thank you. Yes.
Your thoughts on what you think the key skills will be that we need to develop in our children for these jobs of the future. Mm-hmm. We don't know what the jobs are, mm-hmm. but I'm keen to know what you've observed the skills required are.
So for me, the biggest skills come under knowing yourself and how you learn, because they're constantly going to have to learn as they adapt across the future. Knowing how to learn is another key skill that's going to be important, and that ties into the knowing themselves. The resilience, I mentioned that a lot during my talk, is going to be especially important. Being able to adapt well to all of a sudden the job that I just been working at for the last 3 years, I'm now redundant, and I need to transform myself. That level of resilience is not something that we regularly teach our children, but it's something we need to focus on now. And the idea of embracing ambiguity. It's not something that is a comfortable place. And in the IB world, as an IB school, we talk about risk-taking being one of the key profiles of what we develop in our students. And that's that ability to say, yeah, I'll give it a try, even if it terrifies me. Because it's everything that I do that steps out of my comfort zone is helping to build those skills that allow me to not be afraid when the future changes. So for me, those are the key skills that are there. And it comes along with things like basic competencies and basic literacies. But I think what those literacies are changing. 2 years ago, I wouldn't say coming up with the right question is one of the key skills that a student needs, but now with AI, being able to come up with the right question and refine that question is at the top of how I'm teaching research skills to my students. That's going to change, though, as things change. But that's my top ones. Other questions?
Cindy, thank you. That was a really inspiring presentation. I'm wondering, as we are more progressive in our approaches to developing students in a holistic way and understanding those capabilities, creativity and collaboration and communication and resilience, are the assessment tools used to guide entry into our tertiary institutions in any way limiting for us? And how do we make sure that we are they influencing or are they a limiting factor in what we can do? How are they shaping the extent to which we can really customise what we do as educators to the individuals we teach?
My perspective is absolutely. So as a former math teacher, when the calculator came around, it changed what math teaching should be. As calculators started being in our pockets every day of our lives and sometimes obsessively in our hands, we still have not changed how we teach math. And the reason we haven't changed how we teach math is because parents need their kids to go to college for their own peace of mind. And colleges insist that I will only consider you an advanced student if you have taken advanced math. I once had a situation where I had a student who was planning to go to a top university in the United States for journalism. And they told her if she did not have calculus, she would not be accepted. She will never use calculus in her career. She has never used it since. But she spent the summer learning pre-calculus so that she could learn calculus her senior year so she could get in. And that is insane for us to put our students through that. And when I look at the programs that are out there that I described, absolutely, all of them have aspects to their programs that are specifically designed based off of what universities are insisting our kids have as skills. And the universities are not adapting to what the World Economic Forum is telling us in the kind of way that it should. And so this focus on getting kids into college is absolutely limiting us, which is why at my current school, which we're proudly a DP school, because an IB school, because we believe in the power of what the International Baccalaureate program has and how it approaches learning and things like that. But the DP exams are archaic, and they focus too much on knowledge. They are written exams that don't allow us to demonstrate the kinds of skills that are needed in the future. And so we, outside of the DP program, also teach these skills in other classes. So students who chose to come to my school, not only are they doing the International Baccalaureate program, but they take 3 or 4 other classes that we deem to be important because we know that what's happening just through that IB curriculum is not fully teaching them what they need. And so this is something that all schools can look at and say, okay, yeah, we know that this program is not doing everything it needs. It's getting you into college, if that's what you need or what your parents need. But we're going to offer these other classes because we know that you need these skills. And some of them we do through an ungraded program, homeroom and advisories. But some of them we do through graded classes that we've designed ourselves that don't tie into any of these programs. So yes.
Hi, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation and it all encompassing. Well, I have some difference of opinion about your comparison of the curricula, different curricula. IB towards the end is not completely criterion based. It is certainly not. And because we have the examinations there and we have the rigorous standards maintained. I'm an IB examiner myself, so I know that one very well. And even in Cambridge, actually, it is rigor is that flexibility is there actually. In Cambridge, we can choose subjects of our choices, though the school makes it inflexible. Schools make it inflexible, but Cambridge makes it very flexible. But
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
To some of it was simplification for the
Yeah.
charts.
Well, that's not. I mean, I just mentioned that. That's not my question. Actually, I just want to compliment on what you said about the future skills.
Right. I think it's learner agency. I would put it in the form of learner agency, where the learners should have the voice, choice, and ownership in their learning, and they should know how to learn. They should know what to learn, what to unlearn, and what to relearn as needed. Then things will be set. Adaptability is what they require. That's what I just wanted to tell you. No question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Allows them to understand that resilience among all of us is important. And as all these changes are happening in society, those changes are affecting teachers too. I don't know about all of you and what your response was the first time you heard about ChatGPT, but most teachers that I've talked to is like, oh my God, am I going to be out of a job? Am I, it's terrifying all of us. And finding that way to help our teachers also to be resilient so that they're able to be there is key as well to making sure that we can be there to the future. And I think also risk-taking. The teachers that want to stay with the status quo and say, okay, I'm just going to now have them write their essays on paper so I know they didn't use ChatGPT, and those that are saying, okay, I'm going to encourage them to use ChatGPT as a resource, and I'm going to guide them through using it, will also help showcase not to be afraid of the different skills we need into the future. That would be another one I would add to what teachers need.
Any final questions? If not, I would like to thank sincerely Mrs. Cindy Beals for being with us today. Give her a warm round of applause.